Welcome everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about how it may be the case that the dam may be about to burst. And what I'm referring to here is how we may finally be about to see a whole bunch of Switch 2 information. And the reason why I thought I would talk about this today, question this possibility, is because we've been getting a lot of different reports and a lot of people have been talking about the Switch 2 recently that seem to have some pretty good amounts of credibility here. So we've already made a video talking about the Vandal report that was giving us some interesting details regarding the Switch 2 controller, including this ability for it to connect magnetically, a new version of the Joy-Cons. But then there was this also apparent leak from MobaPad, an accessory maker that would be working with Nintendo on Switch 2, hypothetically speaking, that leaked out a whole bunch of information about the Switch 2, including similar things we heard from the Vandal report about the Joy-Cons, but more details on that, but also other mentions like there being an 8-inch screen at 1080p and 4K support when docked. We've discussed that already as well, but what was interesting about that information is that Pioro, someone who's considered to be the most reliable Nintendo leaker of all time, who typically only talks about things shortly before they're going to be made public or officially announced, he came out on Twitter and said that he's been hearing some things, that there have been internal conversations along these lines. However, his main source has yet to verify it. So it's not being said with as much confidence as his Nintendo Direct leaks, but still, if Pioro's saying something on this, there does seem to be something behind it. And there was another report that I have yet to cover that could also be very interesting, that could be adding some fuel to this fire here. Now before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit the notification bell. But when it comes to this report, it's coming from Business Korea, and I'll just sum it up here. The Switch 2 is expected to launch as early as the second half of this year, that would be 2024, I'll speak more on that in a moment. Many suppliers have already reached an agreement of production contracts here. It looks like the Switch 2 will be running on some sort of 7nm process, which would be better than 8 as some people were fearing, but not as good as 4. Samsung will be providing NAND storage for both cartridges and internal memory, which bodes well for the speed of those things and storage space. But also Samsung will be providing the display, and they had to win over against the competitors from China. So basically all this information is saying that Samsung is going to be building most of the Switch 2 components. But there are some weird things that are going on with this. There's a part where it's saying that the Switch 2 will come out as early as this year, but that seems to go against all the other reports we've gotten lately that the Switch 2 has been delayed internally to early 2025. Except it doesn't necessarily really go against it because this is talking about them getting the system ready. And we've already heard from other reports that the system would be ready for this holiday. But it's about the games, supposedly, that Nintendo's taking their time to make sure the lineup is ready. So this hasn't changed much, and it also says as early as. So the second half of 2024 is when Nintendo wanted the console to be ready, but that doesn't mean they can't save it for a later time, which is what all the other reports are suggesting. So as much as I would like to think that this gives us some hope of a 2024 launch, not to any substantial degree, unfortunately. But there's this other point to consider here with Samsung being the one behind the display for the Switch 2, because they would likely be providing some sort of OLED panel. And we've already gone from other reports that it would be an LCD panel. Now OLED in general is better, but is more expensive. So if this ends up being true, I would prefer it, but this seems like conflicting information. How can both reports be true? Well, what if the OLED displays are coming later down the road? Or another possibility, there are going to be two different SKUs at launch. One with an OLED panel, one without an OLED panel. Maybe a more expensive model for Switch will be made available that will have even more internal storage and that OLED screen, and then there will be a cheaper version with just the LCD screen and a little bit less storage. This to me seems conceivable, but I'm just throwing out some possibilities here based off this report. But anyways, the main point here isn't so much this report, but more so that we keep getting more and more information from behind the scenes, from accessory makers, from manufacturers, from industry insiders, and it feels like we may finally be getting close. Now, to be totally fair, this isn't the first time we felt like we're finally getting close. Going back to last holiday, there was definitely a lot of excitement that maybe we could see some type of announcement. And then going back to February, before the reports came out of the internal delay, we were thinking we would see an announcement in March. But if we were to believe all these reports, and the initial plan was for a March announcement, and the console's only been delayed a few months, are we really that far off? Because there's already been a few months. We've also discussed this before, but Nintendo's investors meeting is coming on May 7th. And with that being the first investors meeting for this fiscal year, there's a thought process that perhaps Nintendo will start to open up about this console, because typically Nintendo does start to open up about their consoles in the fiscal year when the console will be launching. I think it should be noted that we knew about the Switch back in 2015, even though it launched in 2017. Nintendo was acknowledging its existence and had it codenamed the NX. And then they gave us a release timing back in April of 2016 for the March 2017 release in that first investors meeting for the fiscal year, and May 7th is going to be the equivalent for this year. So I think it's reasonable to think that we may finally at least get an acknowledgement from Nintendo about the console. Not a full-on reveal, not a trailer, but just an acknowledgement. Something kind of like how they announced the live-action Zelda movie back late last year. But even if Nintendo decides to go quiet for even longer, we are apparently hearing from both accessory makers and manufacturers. And if someone like Piora was starting to speak out on this stuff, it does feel like we're kind of getting close. And something else I would like to consider here is that if March 2025 is indeed a firm date for release as suggested by Midori, who's been said to be a Piora level leaker, then this is already the end of April when I'm recording this. We're basically in May. We're talking about 10 months from now, and we haven't heard anything official about the console. It's not just the console that they need to talk about, but also the games. There's going to need to be some time for these things to be advertised and discussed. I don't think they can go that long without even acknowledging the console's existence. Some may point to how Nintendo didn't actually show any footage of the Switch until October, and then it released in March, which was a very quick turnaround. But I'm not talking about even getting footage here, I'm talking about getting official details, which we had for way longer about Switch, back when it was known as the NX. Something that some people may not be considering here when comparing the Switch 2 situation to the Switch 1 situation. With the Switch 1 situation, Nintendo was coming off of the Wii U. Third-party support was not strong at first, but throughout this generation, the Switch has proven to be a very good platform for third parties. And with Switch 2, from everything we're hearing about this console following a similar mold, third parties are far more likely to be a part of this very early on. And so there are a lot of third-party companies that are probably lined up to make announcements for Switch 2 that are waiting on Nintendo to say something. So I think that adds more pressure for Nintendo to announce things relatively soon. Going back to the point about this idea of the Switch 2 dam being about to burst. It's not just about Nintendo Directs and a whole bunch of big Nintendo games, which I would like to see at some point, but about what we're hearing from accessory makers and manufacturers and third-party companies. We know about that Microsoft deal where they are contractually obligated to have Activision put Call of Duty on Nintendo consoles moving forward. When are we going to get that Call of Duty announcement for a Nintendo console? Feels like it has to happen soon. So I'm just saying, it feels like we're getting close, but we've been burned before already. So I'm trying to temper my expectations here, but fingers crossed that by Nintendo's investors meeting, May 7th, basically about a week from this recording, we hear something official. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.